Welcome to episode 47 of Dial the Gate. My name is David Reed. Thank you for joining me. This is a pre-recorded episode this weekend, which is why it's dark in this room. It'll soon be light on the next few moments here when we bring in James CD Robbins, production designer and art director. This man is a wealth of production knowledge and designs. We've included a number of his pieces for this episode as we go through the conversation. I really hope you enjoy this discussion. I'm really hoping to have him back later on because, I mean, his information just keeps on going. So for this particular episode, we had fan questions submitted in advance. So if you don't run away, we're still going to be having the live chat at youtube.com/dialthegate as always. And that's only going to be available for the first run of this episode. So go in there and hang out with your friends and see what's going on with them. And then afterwards, we're going to be showing off some Stargate art from the fan community and talking up Dial the Gate's new merchandise portal. I really appreciate your help with that. Without any further ado, I'm going to go ahead and bring in James CD Robbins. Oh, and once this episode is over, after the end credits, there's a little bonus at the end when he first came on and saw all of the Stargate things that he basically helped design. So stick around for that at the very, very end of the episode. James CD Robbins, everyone. Enjoy. Art director, production designer, James CD Robbins. Welcome, sir, to my parlor of your lost toys, your island of lost toys. Thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you for having me, David. It's a pleasure.
It's a tremendous pleasure to have you. I mean, I could just go on and on with all my little toys here. I mean,
Whispers.
There's Whispers, right?
Yeah.
And can you name this one?
Ancient Tablet.
Right, exactly.
Is the name on the drawing.
This was Chimera. And I don't know if you'll recognize this one.
Oh, Kino? Yeah, maybe.
What was it?
Just don't ask me episodically.
I
really
right,
suck
exactly.
at remembering the episode.
Oh, you got Whispers? That's pretty darn good. So,
I love that dog.
What was it like working on such an epic project for such a protracted, period of time? Stargate, it's one of those anomalies in the industry where, it lasted well over a decade. These projects, I mean, they are out there, but they are few and far between. What was that like?
Peaking early. Stargate was literally my first union job. And I'd done some design work previous to that as a production designer and some independents and movies and stuff. And I put my information into the union and they categorized me as an illustrator because of my proficiency with a pencil. So I was a little actually taken aback. It's like, well, I'm a production designer, guys. And no, you're an illustrator because I haven't done anything in their world.
Oh, jeez.
Exactly. So I put in my union thing and I got my category or categorization, if you will, and promptly went back to work doing exactly what I was doing at that time, which was more television commercials and indie work, and heard almost nothing about it until a year later. It was almost time for me to redo my permit status. And I got a phone call from Bridget McGuire saying, did you want to come down and have an interview? So I went down and it's Stargate. I'm like, wasn't that a movie? I had no idea. I had no idea that there was a series whatsoever. So there they were going into season 6. And
right.
I'm like, wow, you guys got some history already, which became quite the hurdle that I had to, vault over.
Crash course,
getting up to speed. Yeah, well, exactly. It was like the first 2 days was just me watching videos, trying to get a sense of the show and the sense of, an incredible layered history that they'd already put together in the first 5 seasons. So,
and I want to talk about the lead in to your arrival. It's just an impressive body of work, truly. I mean, the amount of stuff that you were expected to put out on a weekly basis. I really don't know how, your head didn't fly off your shoulders, especially.
Honestly, David, it was the best thing ever. I went home after a couple of days and went, oh my God, they just want me to draw. I can't believe it. And they're going to pay me.
Yeah, that's true. But 40 episodes a year for 3 years, James?
Oh, we did a bunch, man. It was, and quite honestly, they brought me on as the illustrator in season 6. I was art directing in season 7, and for the next few years until I got the production design gig again. But I retained the position of illustrator. I felt like that's part of my whole design process, is to put a pencil in my hand and do the drawings, and what comes out on the page half the time I don't even know what it's going to be when I start. So
you really,
that's the whole process. I mean, I get a script and it's like, there was one that was actually quite funny. Paul Mully, I don't remember the episode.
Just give me information, it'll come.
Well, it might have been part of the whole Bolokai thing and missing.
Okay.
It was shot in the same location. I know that, Latimer. But there was this creature, which was described in the script as something a cross between a squid and a gopher. And I'm like, what the hell does that look like?
And so Taylor's supposed to eat it.
Exactly. So I drew this. Yeah, they had to skewer it with a spear and the whole bit. So I drew this laughable drawing, which Paul Mully actually found so entertaining that he pulled it out and he put it on his wall in his office. But it was ridiculous. It was this large-eyed sort of gopher thing with squid-like tentacles
and a big mouth on it. Yeah,
it was ridiculous. So obviously, and that was one of my learning curves in this, was that no drawing is unwarranted or a bad drawing, because they all lead you closer to what it is that you want.
That's true.
Be arriving at. So even if it's like, no, this is not it, we didn't want this, we wanted, and then you get more input and you get more direction that way.
I sold that creature in PropWorks years later, and let me tell you something, it was still slimy and fresh. So nice. These things were made
best before date.
Right. The thing that blows me away about your work, and it's a testament to that whole production team that they had going for them, and the production process, is the quality of some of this stuff. I mean, the metal, this is metal, the engineering that it takes to create some of these things. You guys had a whole fabrication department.
Everything was set up and in-house. Like I walked into that, and that was a beautiful thing. And then over the first 5 years that I was on the show, Atlantis came along, infrastructure increased. We had to find new lockups just for storage of all the stuff that we were producing. But the model shop with Gord Bellamy and company, oh my God. Like water cut, CNC, you name it. They could do it all. They had a 3D scanner before anybody was even talking about that kind of thing. Man. So to have those technologies, there was nothing that I could draw that they couldn't produce.
And the fact that you draw it, and I want to talk about the time frame as well, within weeks or months, it is willed into solid reality. I think if there is a single mind-blowing thing, Martin Garrow and I talked about this as well, if there's a single mind-blowing thing about that process, is that the writer and you think it, and then it exists. I mean, how do you ever get over that? That is so cool.
I never have, and I hope I never do. I'm like a kid in a candy shop. When they bring me these things, and 99% of the time it was either exactly what I'd drawn, or they had to make certain slight changes in order to make it work in the real world. Like one of the very first thing that one of the first things that I drew when I was brought into the show as an illustrator, there was this device that was being fired into the gate at the SGC from another planet. Yeah, and I had to draw these things with all the evolution. And I'd draw these things that Bridget described to me, and I drew them a little bit. Then she goes, okay, now at this end, they need this EMG generator, electromagnetic pulse EMP generator at this end. Back. And that's going to be in the gate room as the protective shield at the end of this thing. And that's how they're going to shut down this device. And Bridget goes, okay, we'll draw something up for that. So I drew up something as an illustration. She goes, now can you draft that out so they can build it? And I'm like, what? Illustrator, hello. 1 year of drafting in high school 30 years ago. But she goes, oh, you'll figure it out. And she wasn't wrong. I mean, all I had to do, everybody left the art department, and I'm pulling drawings out of drawers and looking at them, trying to refresh my memory from the tiny amount of drafting experience I had at the time. And one of the problems with, and the effects guys, Ray Douglas, rest his soul, and company, were going to build this thing. And what I'd done is I put something that spins in opposite directions on the same axle. And for them to figure out how to do that, I guess was quite a brainer, but they did it. They made it work. So it was very cool. And then that became the flow of things from there on in. Like I say, there was nothing I could draw that they couldn't build. And I didn't look at that as a challenge, because God forbid I actually did draw something I couldn't build. And then where am I, right?
Well, I mean, part of me would think, like, what can I possibly draw that they won't be able to create?
Yeah, and then there's almost nothing. There's nothing. So many smart people, and that's the main thing. A show like Stargate had such talent in every corner of the production that we were able to produce incredibly high-end stuff all the way through on like micro time frames compared to what you should have. Now, there were other times when I got tons of heads up, like when we did the both the Kull Warrior and the ancient Atlantean suits. I did a lot exactly your little friend in the back there. I had heads up on those. So like Rob Cooper came to me at the beginning of the season and said, we're going to do this Kull Warrior in episode 10, I believe it was. Yeah. And that's how much lead time I had. He told me right at the beginning of the season. So I was playing with drawings for that, and I actually wound up doing a clay maquette because I sculpt as well. So that we were able to refine that in a decent sort of amount of time. So you have time to look at it and say, well, a little more like this, and make some changes rather than run through it and wind up with something at the end that's kind of like what you wanted, but not really.
Well, some of this you just have to find your way. It's not like Atlantis. It's not a straight line. I remember a lot of your earlier concept art, and I want to get into this in a little bit, but Brad said snowflake, and it's like, then this way. So.
Yeah, and it's funny because this whole snowflake thing, and I didn't recall it was Brad or Bridget, but regardless, we started down that road when we were putting Atlantis together, but I'd already done illustrations of the Lost City at the Antarctic, and it had a very different feel to it than what Atlantis wound up being. So honestly, I would have to go back and look at final VisFX to see if there was any kind of reverse engineering into that specific look, because it was more like spires, like turret style roofs and things like that in the original concept
I remember it being much more organic, and then Atlantis, the series, was Frank Lloyd Wright.
Yes.
So this I've got to stop myself here because I need to go back and set up some of these pieces in order. I'd like to know what your interests were as a young person. Where are you from? And how young were you when you really started crafting? So I imagine 3, but I'd like to hear it from you.
Well, no, it wasn't as early as that. The Wayback Machine. 14. I think I was 14 when I made the decision that art was going to be my thing, probably because I really wasn't very good at anything else. Very, very quick story. My sister, for Christmas one year, when I was probably around 11, got a John Nagy How to Draw book or kit. And it comes with the pad and then how to draw the covered bridge and all that stuff. Well, she got it and promptly put it away. She did nothing with it. And I used to sneak in and get this thing out, and I would draw John Nagy's course. But I shared it with nobody. I just put the drawings upside down in the bottom of the box, so hopefully nobody would. And she never used it, so that was fine. And then my mother came along one day and went to my sister and said, "Wow, you're drawing really good. I'm glad you're using it." She's like, "What are you talking about?" And that was when I guess the family first realized that I had an interest and the whole bit, but I felt like I was stealing my sister's stuff. So I was very, very much on the QT with it. And then by the time I was, I quit the football team in school so that I could go to art classes that happened on Saturdays, which is the same time as our football
matches.
Yeah, well, yeah, matches and practices and stuff like that. So I had a note from my mom because there were nude models and I was only 14. So she said yes, and they drove me to this thing every Saturday. And that was when I really focused on this as the path that I wanted to take. And when I was 17, my father was a banker. We spent our life, following him around from bank to bank to branch in different cities, and he was always getting transferred. And so he never lived anywhere longer than about 5 years. And I'm from Windsor, Ontario, originally. And there's a little town outside Windsor called London. And my dad came home one day and goes, well, I've been transferred again. We were in Winnipeg at this point. And I was just starting grade 11. And I'm like, oh, well, where to this time? And it's like London. And I'm thinking, London, Ontario. I was like, what did you do wrong? And he goes, no, London, England. And my ears just went ding. They had one branch of the Canadian Imperial Bank of Commerce in London.
And he was going.
He was going there. So he and my mom pulled up stakes, threw me into an apartment, and they moved to England. And I was 16.
What an experience.
I did my last 2 years of high school, living on my own in an apartment. Well, my sister was with me for a while, but then she took off. And as soon as I finished high school, I moved to England as well, and I sent my portfolio over. And my mother was kind enough to go to a couple different universities and drop my folio with them. I was actually invited to attend 3 different colleges over there that I applied to, and wound up obviously choosing one of those. And I spent the next 4 years living in London and doing fine art every day. It was so great because if I'd gone to university for fine art in Manitoba, for example, which was the way it was looking prior to my father being transferred, I would have been doing, art history, and art is related to math and all this other stuff that has nothing to do with learning to be an artist. And instead I wound up with this intensive course, which was just all day, every day, hands-on drawing, painting, sculpting, printmaking, you name it. There was photography, the whole bit. So I just did all that stuff instead of having to take unrelated courses that really wouldn't have had much influence on furthering my artistic skills. So it was very fortunate timing.
James, how much over these years would you think that your process and what you've created is talent, and how much of it was repetition and continuing to work and continuing to refine?
Personally, I think it's interest rather than talent, because I look back at the drawings I did when I decided that this was the path I'd chosen, and I wonder why I chose this path based on that work. It was awful, but I had an interest, and that's what leads you to you do anything 1,000 times and you're a pro, or whatever they say. It's repetition. It's learning your art form from the ground up. And I was so fortunate to go to England at that time and really just develop my craft. And it's repetition. I think, honestly, anybody can learn to draw. People go, I can't draw a stick figure. I go, well, how much time have you ever really spent trying? If it's not in your wheelhouse, if it's nothing that interests you, then you're not going to keep it up. You're not going to follow up. You're not going to become good at it. So if it's important to you, you develop the skill sets. And I've done over my 1,000 drawings now, so I consider myself a professional. I think I did the 1,000 drawings the first 3 months of Stargate. Because literally, I would wind up there before or around 5 in the morning. Boyd Godfrey.
Oh my God!
Boyd used to be the early one, always. And then I sort of bumped him out of that chair. I'd be there at 5 a.m. and I would go home. I'd do my 12 or so and go home at 5 or 6. have a bite to eat, and then I would work until midnight or so, or whenever I couldn't focus anymore, and then get up and do it over again. But I loved it. It wasn't like, oh God, I got to go home. I got to work all night.
No, you're in your element.
I relished it. It was to this day the best gig I've ever had. I don't think potentially I'm going to be able to repeat that anywhere, because so much of this was about the people as well. I mean, having the infrastructure and having the ability to do the things we did was great. And I love the fantasy sci-fi aspect of it, which has kept my creative juices going constantly. But ultimately, at the end of the day, if you got to spend 12 hours plus with people every day and they're not nice people, then you're not going to be enjoying your world. And what we had there was some of the best, some of the most talented. It was, like I say, it's going to be a hard scenario to reproduce ongoing. I've been kind of trying to get the band back together on different occasions in different shows since then. And I do work with some of the same people from time to time, which is always wonderful. I always love the tie back to that time, I guess, is really what it comes down to. I did the 100 this past year, right before COVID. We finished up we were actually the last people shooting, I think. We had an extension. They shut everything down on the Friday, and we got an extension to shoot for 2 more days, and then they shut us down. So 1 more day, rather. We were supposed to have 2 more shoot days. We shot it the Saturday, brought an extra camera, finished it all up. But I had, Ted Kuchera, who was the decorator for Universe and some of Atlantis. He was there with me throughout that. And Kenny Gibbs was prop mastering with us.
Kenny.
So I mean, touchstones, right? These are the people that make the day as enjoyable as it can be, quite honestly.
Absolutely. No, I've lost count of the number of people who have said Rick and Brad and Rob and Jonathan Glassner earlier on, they set the tone for the environment. And if people weren't willing to have a good time and take a little ribbing here and there, you weren't going to make it, No. And you have to for the number of hours that you have to put in. And for
absolutely. I mean, you work hard, and then when you can, you play hard too.
Exactly right.
And that was the other thing too, because of Brad's penchant for golf. And that was a disease I developed fairly early in life too. I learned to golf at 14.
Oh, well, then you were in the club. Pardon the pun.
Not immediately. I suffered some car accidents, and when we first started the show, I was on morphine all day, every day for about the first 10 years I was on the show because of just ongoing problems, back problems and stuff. So I managed to get all that fixed up. But yes, I was late to the club, but we went to, it was so awesome. We went to Vegas. We went to Phoenix. You're in Phoenix, are you not?
Yes, sir.
Brad had a place in Phoenix, and Mark Davidson and myself, and Andy Makita, Paul Mully, John Smith. I mean, they put together these golf trips, and I've never experienced anything like it before, and the camaraderie of these people was spectacular. I mean, Brad was always like the most fantastic host possible. We ate very well, we drank very well, and we some of us golfed very well. I tended to be a bit streaky. That's how they called it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I'd have my moments, and then it'd be like, oh my God, he just shot 112. What happened?
Jeez. In addition to the people, you are creating a visual style that is very much a language. I mean, we have this in season 7, and there is a line that goes indirectly from this to something like this. I can't imagine what that process would be like to discover that language and interpret that language iteration over iteration from show to show, because they're both of these things are the same race, but they're different eras of that race. What was it like sitting down and figuring that out? who these people in particular, the ancients, were, from 100,000 years ago to quite possibly several million years ago. That had to have been extremely daunting and exciting at the same time.
I'd say more exciting than daunting.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people that go into making the decisions as to what to look for any given race is. Now, mind you, we'd go to new planets and I'd get to go, okay, what's this going to be?
Right.
But it became sort of automatic. I would sit down if I had to do something Atlantean, then I knew what that was. And if I had to do something ancient, or then it had a different feeling. I didn't consciously go, okay, well, I got to do this. That you just fall into, because once you know what the look is and the feel is, it just comes off the pencil. It does for me anyway. So yeah, less daunting, more just like, okay, where are we going to go with it now? Okay. And once you have the rules, I would draw shapes. I would draw like the gate and your little friend behind you. Started out with just shapes, and develop the look of the armor, and then you can use color as a great way to join things together visually as well. So universe wound up having the color palette that exists on the little fellow behind you. Right. Is generally the overall color scheme for the show right there. We had our golds and bronzes and brasses, and developing the interior of the Destiny, all the metals and stuff that we developed through the paint department to represent kind of the same things, even down to the bed sheets and stuff on the beds. I had Ted make sure that all the fabrics that we used had a sheen to it, so they looked like there was almost like a metallic aspect to that as well. So you find your design theme and extend it as much as you're able to, pushing the envelope to try to keep that visual into all aspects of things, which is why a Kino and a tablet at the end of the day kind of feel like brethren.
Yeah. They are, in the lore of the show, and they also come from you and from all the other people that put them together. So there is that design aesthetic that just kind of carries through and magically, materializes on screen. Yeah. Which artists, James, have pushed you the most? Either those in your life or those you have known by their work?
When I was in college, I was looking at Edward Hopper's work quite a bit. American painter, early 19th century. His paintings were all about light, and really that's what any painting comes down to at the end of the day, or most paintings come down to at the end of the day, is light, because obviously you have nothing on the canvas if there's no light shining in your subject matter. So I liked Hopper's work. It was so difficult to choose, though, because being in England at that time, I could go to so many different galleries. I went across the pond and went to, or the channel, if you will, and went to Amsterdam and saw the Rijksmuseum and saw the Van Gogh Museum. And it's like, there's a prolific guy. Crazy? Sure. But prolific? Wow. The amount of paintings. So, tons of different influences. I love the drawings of Heinrich Clay. A master with sort of like fantasy drawings, animal stuff. Backtracking slightly, one of the things that interested me strongly as a youth was wildlife work. And I used to do pen and ink drawings where basically I'd be building an animal like a lynx, hair by hair, with a crow quill pen and ink setup. And I thought potentially that was the road I was going to go down, was to do the wildlife things. But instead, I wound up incorporating them into these drawings that are very much like Heinrich Clay, who I didn't know at the time, but just putting animals into human situations, and bad puns. I remember doing one drawing called "A Wolf in Chic Clothing," which is cheesy but fun, right? At any rate, so I would say that there's no one artist that sort of defined or led my direction. I was just inundated with so much, especially like I said, moving to England at that time. It's you can't move for landing at a museum or an art gallery over there.
That's true.
Spectacular. You look at the exterior of Selfridge's, which is just a department store, and it's got all hand carved cornices and sculptural work, and I'm like, that's a department store? Wow. Back when artisans were populating the earth. Now they're fewer and further between. It's all done with CNC, and the human touch is removed to a large
taken right
degree.
out of it.
Which is why I love the ability to do things like make something from nothing. I guess that's the main thing that drives any artistic process, is to just out of these elements you produce something 100% different that hopefully it will have a voice of its own, So.
And that has a quality that holds up and still lights up for 17 years later.
Exactly.
So
exactly.
It goes to show, you put the right elements in, the right ones come out. The thing that that blows me away is that the stuff, a lot of these pieces, appeared for seconds on screen, and I guess it comes down to the budget and the time that you guys were allowed to put in was, we're not going to just create it so that it falls apart right after it's done, because we may need it later. Yeah. And you know what? We're going to do it, so we're going to go big or go home. So we're going to make it right, and we're going to make it feel heavy and weighted in the actors' hands, and it's going to help them create the performance.
Yeah, and then I think that's a big thing for artists. Robert Carlyle told me that the detail in the Destiny set, the interior, he came back to me and went, this is fantastic. It allows me to really believe in the environment. And even if it's little nuances, like we had rivets that we made that were our own. We didn't want to use earth-based screws and things like that. So those are little plastic plant-on things that were molded and put throughout the ship. And then the lighting on the front of the stairs coming down into the gate room, that was one of the things that Carlisle mentioned specifically. But
the dry ice.
Well, yeah, there's that. And when I built the Destiny, I built the whole thing 3 feet up off the floor. So there's basically a crawl space underneath, which allowed us to access the floors, both to put lighting in, to run special effects through, like steam and whatnot. The little blasters that went off after the gate closed. My idea, but not a great idea in the long run, because number one, it was very costly to run the CO2 every single time the gate shut down, and the noise factor that it put out. They had to go around and give people the option if they wanted to wear hearing protection, and then makeup had to go in there and paint those things skin tone so they'd disappear on whoever was wearing them.
And then the ADR, if there was dialogue.
Yeah, nobody says anything when that's happening. It's
there you go. Just let it do its thing.
But that attention to detail. I mean, I learned early on the show that that's just how they rolled. I mean, they were not producing stuff, quickly and cheaply. They had a very, very strong model shop department that, like, as I say, can produce anything you need. And quality was the name of the game, because as you say, you don't want to break it down in an actor's hand, or you want it to be available to you 3 episodes down the road potentially,
right? And
you may not know that right now. So
or repurpose it to something else.
Yeah, we did everything full on. There wasn't as much of that going on Stargate, quite honestly. With the exception of the village in the Thomas special effects stage, that had a facelift every 3 weeks, basically. But we'd have to wait for that period of time and have some episodes that were lighter to justify the cost of going in there, because it was 3 stories tall in places and both sides of the road and 100 or more feet long. No matter what you're going to go in and do to it, even if it's only paint and minor upgrades, there's a chunk of money that has to go behind that. So they would, the writers were obviously very, very smart and knew how to sort of pace these things within the budget, so that it's like, okay, well, we know that we can go back into the village and redo it in 4 episodes. which also gave me the time, necessary to go in and affect the changes in the first place. So,
wow. I remember seeing that place and the cave and just the different like facades that you guys had, especially with the village, where, one was from this kind of era, another was from this kind of an era. And then when I had gone, I think Avalon 3 had already been done at that point. So, but I mean, you got the ones where you're going to use the entire set, so it had to be more uniform, because you're going to go straight down that whole pathway to the big double doors in the back. It was just marvelous, and I had remembered that Brad was talking for years about, wanting to set something up like that, because the team comes to a village and it's like, oh boy, here we go, a village. It'd be much better to have that existing set, which you guys got in season 9 of SG-1 and season 2 of Atlantis, and just opened up all kinds of possibilities.
Yeah, well, when we took that stage over, they also had Blade Trinity had finished shooting in there, and we took the Blade set and turned that into a good portion of Atlantis as well. So which was great and also problematic, because if you wanted to affect any changes on the village itself, you had to hope that you weren't going to get bumped out because they were actually physically shooting in the other end of the stage. So then you're either working on the bell or you're waiting until they're not shooting. But we worked around it.
The rumor that was, I'd really like to know the answer. The Blade sets, were those transferred to you guys for $1? Is that true?
You know what? I'm not going to solve your riddle. I'm sorry, okay. I don't know that. I don't know the
there we go. That's fine. You were mentioning the process that you would have on Stargate versus some of the other projects that you've done. Was the concept and production design process on Stargate in any ways unique from others that you've worked on? From a time perspective, allowed to do stuff, from a quality perspective in terms of the detail that you're allowed to put in?
Well, I think every show wants that amount of detail. A lot of the time it'll come down to, are you physically given the time by writers? I mean, on Stargate, they were exemplary. I really, they had most of their scripts, or at least outlines, in hand at the beginning of the season, and we were never sitting around waiting for them, or very, very, very rarely waiting for them to give us things so we would have time to do this. Now, other shows that I've worked on since then, not always the case, and there's been more than one occasion where they've said, well, we need this thing. And I'm like, well, that's great, but you got 10 minutes. So, and not literally 10 minutes, but it's like, you need lead up time. If you want a quality product built, you need to put the time behind it to manufacture it properly. And unfortunately, either the inner workings of the show wouldn't allow it, or the writers weren't on the ball enough to get it early to us so that we could produce these things properly. And there's been a couple occasions when stuff has come to camera and I'm like, oh boy, it's like, I have to catch a plane right now.
Well, hopefully that didn't happen too much on Stargate.
No, that was not a thing on Stargate at all. Wow. And as I say, this is something that, once again, we had the infrastructure there. Everybody knew everybody. I mean, you could almost do this by telepathy or osmosis. It was we just worked so well together after that amount of time. It was a family. It really was a family in Stargate. And at the end of the day, 10 years later, that's really what, I do all the other aspects of film for other people and other shows and stuff like that. Nothing I've ever done has equaled Stargate. And wow. I attribute 90% of that to the people that are there, for the Brad Wrights, the Rob Coopers, Paul and Joe, and it's led from the top down by very, very high quality people, not just talented but high quality people. So I was very fortunate to have my time there.
You took over for Ken Rabehl, correct?
Yeah, I guess he would have been there in 5. Yes. I've met Ken since.
I was going to ask if you ever spoke with him.
Well, Richard Hudolin.
Yes.
Was brought in at one point. I don't know what season I was in on
season
Stargate,
1.
but he was brought in later after he left the show, and I'd been on Stargate for a while, and then he got Painkiller Jane as a show, And he actually called me and said, "Hey, I'm short. I can't find anybody to do any illustrative work for me." And I'm like, "Yeah, sure, I'll come work for you." So I went and worked, and I worked with Ken. And I look at Ken's drawings and I'm amazed, because you could build something from his illustrations, because he puts every nail in the boards, and the detail is ridiculous. And I'm there singing his praises for that, and he's turning around going to me going, "God, your work is it's so loose, but it's so descriptive." And I'm like, so we were a mutual admiration society. It was quite lovely. Ken was a great guy.
The thing that you mentioned earlier that blows me away. I'm privileged to have a few of your pieces, and the accuracy by which 99% of them are duplicated, when they're willed into solid reality. They took the time to make it almost precisely what is on the page, and in some cases precisely what is on the page. They're just magicians, those fabricators.
And that's just it. And that's why I say, there's nothing I couldn't draw that they couldn't build. And I wasn't getting stuff back that was kind of like what I drew. I was getting back what I drew. And this leads back to that very early comment you made about, it's like Martin Garrett said, I never get over the glee, the little kid glee at seeing something that I've drawn made into, something you can either walk around in or hold or what have you. There's a big charge that I get out of that, and hopefully that never goes away.
Were you gifted anything when the show ended of any of this stuff that you designed?
No. I had a thing of the Destiny about that big, which is one of the first little blanks that they put out in the model shop just as a maquette. I did have the original cast from the Kull Warrior.
Okay.
But I gave it away to a guy in town here who runs. It was sitting in my basement, right? So I'm like, so a guy that runs a toy shop here in town that has very, very strong sci-fi. The guy does his own dioramas in the store. It's quite amazing.
Wow.
But I just said, "Hey, any interest in this thing?" He's like, "Are you kidding me?" He couldn't believe it. It was like his birthday when I dropped this thing. It was just unfinished. It had one of Boyd's little tattoos that we were eventually going to put onto the finished piece that had been laid in as a test. So, wow. But for me, no, I don't really have anything. I got the little gate they gave us all as, mementos, the Atlantis gate. But other than that, no, I didn't take anything away from me. And as I told you, I don't know. I'm still getting data recovery people to check into it, but we had that flood and I lost 2 towers that were sitting on the floor in the basement. And right next to them were, unfortunately, what's that saying about eggs in one basket?
Exactly.
I had the hard drives that I backed things off onto were also down there. They all got damaged in the flood. So I'm hoping that a percentage of it will be, we'll be able to get back. But I still have almost all my original hand drawings in my sketchbooks and stuff like that. The only thing I ever handed over, because I was under contract to do that, was the final digital versions that were used to create or go into the show itself. I didn't think they wanted all my little scribbles and half thought out ideas and stuff like that. So all that stuff's still taking up space in my garage.
It's the language of the show, from season to season was so consistent in terms of the design language. You have something like this that was created for, a clip show, with a remarkable guest actor.
I was going to say, not just any clip
That's
show.
exactly right. With Homer friggin' Simpson.
That's it.
And it becomes a core component of all 3 series. I mean, when you were given the opportunity to design this, I doubt they told you, okay, we need you to design a little plastic piece that looks like a stone that's going to be the methodology for much of our storytelling for the next, 7, 8 seasons of the franchise.
Yeah, no, they had no idea at the time. So, it came in and that was for Citizen Joe, and that's potentially where it was going to live and die. And then they, I guess, just liked the ability to use it potentially as a plot forwarding device, right?
That's what it comes down to.
As much as anything,
That's right.
And that's what they called the PFDs too, the little things that they used on Atlantis, the portable Walkman thing.
The Palm Pilots.
Yeah, which were referred to as PFDs or plot forwarding devices in the meetings and stuff.
They're tricorders, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
It's the nature of the beast.
Something's going to show up on this. It's going to take us into the next scene, right?
Right, exactly right. Teresa wanted to know, are there any sci-fi series or shows in particular which provided you with inspiration over the years?
Well, I mean, I got to go back to my two favorites. One director, Ridley Scott. You get to pick the two. Go ahead, you tell me.
Well, if it's Ridley Scott is one, then George Lucas. I mean,
no, I'm just saying out of his works, Alien.
Oh, Alien,
Blade Runner. Alien, and Blade
absolutely.
Runner. And that's, absolutely. I mean, those two shows are basically the premise for almost every sci-fi thing that's been done since, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, there are people who've found other creative ways to represent stuff, but I mean, when I was doing the Destiny, there are some homages to Ridley in there.
Yeah.
I mean, having just like that, the central communication room with 5 corridors going off of it. They don't look anything like his, but the idea of that layout it's so smart because it allows you to confuse the audience so easily into, well, you walk them down here, you turn a corner, oh, they go up there, and you turn a corner. You don't know where you are anymore. And it really spoke to being able to make the Destiny with basically one set in one stage, and I filled the stage, feel like a ship that just goes on and on and on and on and on. And, Ridley was largely behind that sort of feel. And Andy Makita in the very beginning of Air did that move through the ship, up through the floors and everything. I was watching that and getting chills and going like, oh, this is so cool. And it looked monstrous. Like you could just go on. There's different areas in the whole place. So,
from a viewer perspective, I would never look at Destiny and say Nostromo. I would say Nautilus, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. But from a production design standpoint, in terms of layout and everything else, you're right. It is Nostromo in terms of how you would move.
And I wasn't speaking to his design aesthetic. I was speaking to just how clever he had been with putting that ship together. I mean, the one area that I loved the most in the alien ship was that area where it was raining inside, where
the interior.
He went to look for the cat, and there's all the chains.
Yeah.
And condensation because the ship is so big inside. I'm like, oh my God, that's brilliant.
Yeah, absolutely.
And when we did the seed ship, the one that our little aliens were living on, that
yes, the Ursini.
Yes, the Ursini. Yes, thank you, Mr. Database Central.
Not always right.
Oh no, you're gonna get 90% right compared to me. My memory for that kind of detail is not what it should be, perhaps. But that ship being just a mechanical ship, that was fun for me because I could create spaces that people weren't supposed to theoretically be in, and they were just really
it's
narrow,
a factory,
tight cord, exactly.
Yeah.
And then setting up that one shot of the gates being built into that was something I really wanted to do. I did a map for that, and they weren't sure they were going to have the money to be able to afford the digital work for that particular scene. But at the end of the day, they acquiesced and put it in, and it was so funny too because they pulled Volker and I think it was Volker that pulls Rush into that room and says, "Hey, look," and thought he'd be all excited. And Rush is like, "Yeah, whatever."
Yeah, well, you know what? I'm going to be perfectly honest with you here. I'm grateful that we got that shot, but the sequence was a letdown for me because I was wanting to see the gates being assembled, and I'm sure it had nothing to do with the episode, so I can understand why you guys wouldn't have had the budget to do that, but at least we got to see the space. So that's
where
really
I was
cool.
On the same page as you, David. Absolutely on the same page
this
as you.
This is the chance.
I would have loved if this thing was still, digitally automated. So you could have seen, pieces going together and doing things. But just to have that one thing where you can see the gates.
Yeah, exactly. You can see the assembly line,
Kind of tells the story.
Exactly right. Akos wanted to know, and this goes back to the universe gates. When you designed the universe gate, this is kind of esoteric, but I think it can lead kind of back into the larger conversation in terms of aesthetic. When you designed the universe gate, the oval shapes on both sides of them, were they deliberately or just unconsciously perhaps meant to be a connection to the terminal that these attach to? I mean, was that all kind of like the same design aesthetic?
No. In a word, no.
Okay.
No, that was just, so if there is a like feel, it's what we talked about earlier, and it's just developing a visual language for things. If it's ancient, it's got this sort of feel. If it's that, I never at any time said, this, I could use these elements from the communication stones and put them in there. So no, that was just a coincidence.
Okay, interesting. What ship design over the seasons was your favorite?
Come on, really?
I had to be fair to ask.
It's the destiny. That not only. Oh, there it comes.
So yeah, we're gonna duplicate the shot from the opening episode. No, I'm kidding.
There you go.
A fan created these.
I'm sorry?
A fan created these.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Nicely done. Nicely done.
It has the scorchings from the impacts. You know, it's.
Oh, and I saw you got a shuttle with it too, right?
Yes, they're up on not on here right now, but they're separate. So and also one of the Nakai drone ships as well.
Nice.
You have inspired many fans.
That was one of the things that I truly did love about the show is being able to design all the vis effects as well. I mean, since the point I started on the show, I don't think there was one vis effect that I didn't have a hand in on some level or another. Obviously, I would start things, and they didn't necessarily work out exactly as drawn in the viz. Sometimes it was cost issues. I know there was a drawing that I did, oh Lord, SG-1 way back, and it was a space graveyard. And I did this rendering. It took me an inordinate amount of time because the amount of detail I put into it. And it was like, which kind of ships were they? Asgard ships, I think, all blown and floating in space. And I did this ultra wide thing, picturing that they'd be able to do sort of like a move through the mat and a little bit. Brad comes in and he goes, I'm sorry, that's like a $50,000 vis effects cost to do that as a 3D element. And I'm like, all right. I told him I was going to wear a black armband for the rest of the week.
Oh, jeez.
But that was about one of the few that I knew of that I'd done that wasn't going to go through. But I still love that drawing. It's very cool.
I would love to have a look at it at some point.
You've probably seen it.
I've probably seen it.
It's out there.
I would think that you would have an idea for, okay, if you want this, it's going to take this number of hours for me to produce a selection of drawings to create that. I would think that you would be able to say, okay, my creative output, you probably can math it out pretty well. I would think that you would have to be able to, like you would say, you would come in at 5 a.m, leave, at midnight and have put out X number of pieces. Do you have like a specific kind of output rhythm, or is it just piece to piece in terms of what's going on?
Every drawing is its own thing. Every work of art, everything that I do. I can't sit down and say, okay, well, I'm going to need 3 hours to finish this. I might have a ballpark in mind, but like I say, some drawings you'll sit down and they'll just flow, and I'll be done in a couple hours. And other drawings, you'll find either physical issues like perspective or scale or things like that if you're not getting them right, that'll bug me, and I got to keep at it until it looks like I kind of intended to, or it looks believable. So the time frame varies hugely, I would say.
What was the most time-intensive prop or costume that you put in on the franchise? Ideally, one of each. And I mean, like Rob, like you were saying with like Cooper, you were given heads up on certain pieces, so that would probably lean towards them. But I'm very curious as to what you would.
Well, I mean,
recall.
The Kull Warrior was one of the first. When it comes to character design, I did the Ori Warriors,
Yes.
and the Priors concept and development for scarification and everything else, their look. Julian Sands, his whole build. The Kull Warrior itself was one of the biggest ones, because it was the first one we put through. I think that came through at $80,000 for the first prototype that Dan Payne wore. And that was, I was going to the model shop every other day to see what progress there was and deal with issues on the shoulders of the firing weapon, the cod piece.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So what'd you do today, hon? Oh, never mind.
It has to get done by someone.
Exactly. But our little friend behind you, that has two different incarnations. You've got the Atlantean version there, the original version, which was in Asgard, I believe, had a different helmet. That's all I did is redesign the helmet, and I think they might have touched the paint differently or something. But
the V's here on the sides, those were a part of the original too, because those really look like chevrons.
Yeah, no. Once again, I think that's probably more just coincidental than anything.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I mean, once you see something, you can read into it. But I mean, character design was always fun, and I don't look at them as being like one was more difficult than the other. Each one had its own set of problems to solve, and fortunately, after I did the drawing, I didn't have too much to do from a problem-solving standpoint, because, like we've said, the varying departments were just so good that they handled it, and I would go in and say, well, this maybe needs to be a little more like that, or can we finish this a little differently, and stuff. But for the most part, it just followed a process rather than I would say being difficult. And as far as props go, one of my favorites was Ronon's gun. I went up to him first and I met him, and Jason's like, I'm 6'3", and I'm like looking up at him. That's not a feeling I'm used to. So I was like, well, I got to design this weapon for you and the whole bit. So I got a sense of his scale. And I'm like, this is going to have to be a really big gun.
It is.
So I went back, and actually I worked off of a Peacemaker for that.
Oh,
the old
really?
revolver. Yeah, that was the initial step forward, and that's somewhere that I'll try to use real world reference, because these are things that have to work on whatever level. Whether it's just how does a hand grip work in your hand? Same thing with swords and stuff. God, I did so many swords over the years.
You did.
But
I mean, you did Excalibur, for crying out loud.
Well, and oddly, Antire's sword and a bunch of other, and the Wraith General's sword, and the whole bit. And oddly enough, it led me to an interest in forging, which I know I haven't done it myself yet. I've done a little tiny bit, but not making weapons. But it's something that's on my bucket list for down the road, is to build myself a little forge and make myself a couple of big swords.
Any chance? I know that MGM, that a design or a treatment was sent over to MGM for a potential art book of yours. Any chance of your Stargate art coming out?
They
have the assets.
It was a different time then. I wrote 100 pages of a book, fully illustrated, with all the drawings and descriptors and which episode and what it meant, the whole bit. And I went down and I met with. It was actually, I was almost at a point where I was going to start pushing through, and then Sony came in and became partnered with MGM. And when they did that, apparently Sony has a book division. MGM didn't care. They were like, yeah, go ahead, pretty much. But Sony came in and it's like, no. You want to proceed with this, you got to pay us $50,000 for licensing. And I'm like, well, how be you let me produce the book, we'll put it out, and I'll pay you out of the proceeds, and then everybody wins, and you can actually make a few bucks here, and put out a decent product that speaks to the show. And they were very adamant about money first. So that died its own little unnatural death. Yeah, it is, especially since I spent 2.5 months, I think, working on it, getting it to the stage it was at. and had Paul Brown assisting me at the time, Legends Memorabilia. I don't know if you met Paul, you know him. So he was intrinsic in, moving that forward to that point that as soon as, they put down the $50,000, pay to play, that just all sort of folded up and went away.
Makes me sick thinking about it.
Well, and
I got to see it, and it was
a
cool.
different time, David. Right now, I could go online right now, type in Stargate artwork, James Robbins, and fill the screen with almost every drawing that would have been put into the book anyway. So I don't know that there's even that much of a need for it, if you will.
But they're the images themselves. They're not your. They are.
They don't have my take on it.
They don't have your roadmap, and your roadmap is key. So the roadmap is what makes it interesting. So.
Oh, I mean, I think so, but like I say, if it's about just the artwork, anybody can view.
That's true too.
Almost everything I did at any time online now. It's like, and in preparation for this, I was trying to remind myself. I go, what was episode did I do that? And I went, and I'm like, holy crap, here's my portfolio.
Exactly. I want to talk a little bit about your charcoal pieces. I remember you saying that charcoal was I think you said it was your favorite medium to work in. What were some of your favorite charcoal pieces from Stargate?
It's my favorite from a development standpoint. Let's put it this way. I love all mediums. I'm actually, the thing I love to do the most is oil painting, but obviously there was no time for that kind of thing to develop concept work that way. So it was charcoal drawings because they're largely forgivable. I can go in with charcoal and do a drawing, and I can erase back with a kneaded eraser right back to the page, and it's like it was never there, and adjust and amend. If you're working on pencils, which I did as well, the work tends to be tighter. Unless I'm working on a huge thing, the work tends to be tighter, and there's less room for error, if you will. So yeah, I mean, it just became my methodology. I could do something nice and big, like I was using 30 by 40 inch drafting vellum.
Wow.
To do the drawings on, and I had a drafting table, and I would just use the drafting dots on the corners and put my drawings up and work on them. I could photograph them, turn around, put them in the computer, and start working up the color and the texture and the lighting and the mood or whatever it was that particular thing had. Putting in, space effects and whatnot onto, like drawings of the Prometheus, for example, when I first did that.
I remember you created in Enemy Mine, you created a landscape of ruined Jaffa armor, that the Unas had cannibalized.
Yes, on the beach shot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There was some sweet stuff there. Prometheus.
Yes.
It's our first Earth spacecraft, aside from, the F-302, which is a fighter, our first carrier. What were your inspirations for Prometheus?
Basically, I was given my inspiration. It was to be a ship that had alien technology in it, but we didn't see that alien technology. And the mandate was that it felt utilitarian, function over form, and that it was more like an Earth-based battleship or something along those lines. So it's not a pretty ship. I mean, I don't even think it is, quite honestly, but I did like the front end, sort of have that bird of prey sort of like drop.
Yeah, it's got like a swoop to it, yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, it was a short-lived ship.
Yeah, 3 seasons.
Yeah, but quite honestly, Peter Bodnaris came up with the Daedalus, and I think that was a much sort of prettier.
You did not come up with Daedalus.
No, Daedalus is not me. No, that was Peter Bodnaris. I think that was he wound up doing 3. I mean, he did a couple ship strings for Space Race as well, I believe, because there were just so many ship designs were needed in that. But yeah, the Daedalus was Peter.
And it was an interesting leap. We just basically took the top off the ship and shrunk it a little bit and widened it. I remember thinking turtle the first time I saw it, because we see it kind of overhead from behind. I'm like, oh, they got themselves a turtle ship. It was. I
was just curious what all it looked. It reminded me almost of a aircraft carrier.
Yeah,
because it was so much flat deck over the top. I'm like, Oh, yeah, maybe that's where you keep your fighters, and lock
Yeah,
them down
he's
and
got them
fly
on the
in
sides.
space.
So I've
Yeah.
got um, a the fan creations of these things. That back there, 7,000 pieces of styrene.
Oh my God.
He said 7,000. I don't physically know how he did it, but it's just amazing the artistry that you guys helped encourage in the fan community. I'm sure you've seen some of this stuff out there floating online. Just the care that has been put into so much of the work that you guys created. They wanted to echo in these little guys right here. They wanted to echo it.
Well, I mean, the reason that the show went 17 years, I mean, it's not a surprise. It's the fan base. You guys are in the same way that Stargate is its own beast. The fans of Stargate are their own beast. So dedicated. So, I mean, here we are 10 years later, still talking about it. And I guess potentially there's something in the loops for the fourth incarnation.
I'm hopeful. SG4 for the win.
That'd be pretty awesome, I think. It really would.
What about the Supergate?
What about the Supergate, David?
Very, very different. It's almost like a collection of chevrons,
Which is exactly, all those pieces, apparently, and my memory of this particular build and time is not great. I know that we were given the mandate that each one has to be at least the size of a cargo ship, because they were going to put a cargo ship into it as a missing piece and stop them from finishing the Supergate. So basically that gave us pseudo scale. And then obviously it had to be large enough to allow one of the Ori motherships to come through as well. And those things were pretty big in the final information.
The Supergate from Beachhead is not the scale of the Supergate that exists in Camelot. When we look at it, it's almost like they created one Supergate and then got the bigger pieces, because Sam has to stand on one of the pieces in Camelot, and she is dwarfed by it. So it's almost like they created one Supergate and then got those pieces through to create a bigger Supergate. It's a great design.
Possibly. And honestly, that there wasn't a whole lot of, if I can actually admit to this, wasn't a whole lot of design aesthetic into it. They needed to obviously be able to repeat all the way around. Each piece was, I'm trying to think that they were typical. My memory says that I created one piece in 3D, and I do some 3D modeling as well. A lot of the smaller props and things I've done, I do in 3D. So you got to have the talents. If I just worked with a pencil, dude, I'd be a dinosaur. So I had to get a little bit of the digital skills going, right? But like I say, I recall a rendering that I did with one of the pieces sort of flying in, the gate almost fully assembled. I'm guessing this was the last piece that I'd drawn. And then there's a cargo ship.
Shoved into it.
Tilt. The Tilt was in the cargo ship, right?
Vala was.
Oh, okay. There you go. Vala. See, my memory.
That's all good.
But I did remember there was a cargo ship there. What do I get?
Yes, you win. For sure. How long did it take for Atlantis to evolve? I know we talked about it a little bit, because the first iteration of it was going to be in a base in Antarctica, rising and then meeting Anubis's fleet and then probably blowing them all to hell. And then it got moved to the Pegasus Galaxy. The design radically changed from Lost City into Rising 1 and 2. Tell us about that whole process a little bit more, if you don't mind.
Well, I can tell you certain amounts about it. That was Bridget's show to bring to a reality as a designer. Obviously, I did a lot of the illustrative work that led to some of the finishes, but the set was all Bridget.
Okay.
For the first 3 seasons. And I finished up the last 2 seasons, and I kind of reinvented the Wraith a bit. Well, I invented the Wraith anyway, because those were my babies. bringing the character concept and design to life, which I think for an alien race that was prosthetic, I think that really worked beautifully. There's a lot of times you see aliens who are your guys in rubber suits, and it's like, I'm not buying it. Which I think was also what led Brad to the decision to have no prosthetic aliens in universe and to go with fully realized visual effects versions of our aliens.
Well, you're out there on the fringes of practically reality. Nothing is going. The excuse in our galaxy and in Pegasus was the ancients created all of us, so we all have kind of a basic design template. Whereas on the edge of the universe, nothing out there looks like us.
Yeah,
so,
new rules.
And the technology had obviously, gone far enough that you could then pull those kinds of things off on a reasonable budget for a television.
Yeah.
So
and the what was it? Rob came to me with the idea for our blue space aliens. You'll know the race.
The Nakai, which were never actually named on screen. They were fish-like, and they were cool as hell, man.
Fish-like because they were based on a thing called a barrelfish, which is a real thing that doesn't look like it should be a real thing. It's got this, I don't know, you can look them up online. Look up barrelfish later on when you get a second. But they've got a clear dome for a head that the eyes float inside of. And Rob brought me this drawing and goes, yeah, what is something like that? And I went, wow, really? And I used to get, there was a tsunami at some point during Stargate, and I had 4 different people. It washed up all this stuff from the bottom of the ocean that you're not supposed
to see. Yeah.
And I had all these people sending me pictures of this stuff going, oh, dude, you got to check this out. This is like the stuff you draw.
Wow.
So, and sure enough, the barrelfish is a very, very strange anomaly. But you also get into creatures that light up on their own and stuff like that. So
they have to create their own light.
We have an alien landscape in our oceans. It certainly helped with the Nakai's design, I would say that. And then the ships and stuff like that, all the different ship designs, those are always fun to do.
The ancient drone, you designed that, correct?
Correct.
The number of pieces that went into that, because I sold the prop, and you have the head on top of it that kind of looks like this. Yeah. Then you have the bulb underneath, and then the veins attached to the sides, and then the tentacles on the back. Every single link to that, had to be fabricated on its own because they shrink as they go down. That was just a marvelous design. I can't fathom what that took to create.
But once again, I just totally take my hat off and bow deeply to the incredible talents of the people in the model shop who are able to ongoing produce spectacular results. And VisFX were able to also take the renderings and really bring those things to life too. So and as I say, David, I've never found this level in any show since, and I've done a few over the last decade.
Absolutely.
But like I said, I peaked early. This was a fantastic place to start, but it's certainly a high bar to set to ever hope to get back to. And I'm just so thankful that I had a chance to spend a decade of my life in this world.
How many designs did Destiny go through before Brad said chevron and shoved that napkin in your face?
I probably did 20 or more different renderings. Okay. And a lot of them never really got past basic shapes because that's what we were talking about. I think there was a large push for it to be disc shaped initially.
Oh.
Something more like the Independence Day ship, if you will.
The motherships, yeah.
Yeah. And there were 3 or 4 iterations of that at least, and then some other ones that were longer. One of them that I did, the images that I sent you the other day from that.
There's one in there.
The last one there's one in there. It's a charcoal drawing, and you can see that the front is still the disc. It actually sort of looks like NCC from the side angle, but. If once again, you got to rip somebody off. They're established players, right? But then it had more of the long rock because we had two camps. One was wanting something longer, and one was wanting the ring thing. And then all of that just went out the window. And Brad said, "Here, look at this." And there's this little sort of swoopy design that I played with. And honestly, as soon as he gave me the shape, I think I did 2 more iterations. That was it.
Wow.
That was pretty much the destiny. I mean, we had to flesh out details as story ideas developed, like where is the observation room in relation to the big dome room where the glass had broken out, and where Park winds up getting
the for plants and everything. I can't think of the word now. But and then the shuttle, and down in front.
Exactly.
And you got shuttles to the side.
But they want to be able to see the shuttle taking off from the observation deck as well. And those things, obviously led to the physicality of the space. And then I developed interior, before we did the actual layout of the ship, I had developed corridor concepts for how they ran through the ship and stuff. And then I worked backwards from those into the physical set. But I did learn a very, very valuable lesson from Richard Hudolin after the fact. He had done the SGC in stage 5, and it was a 28-story facility on 1 floor. Which is, and for how many years did they keep that the suspension of disbelief going?
Long time. From a design from a movie in the 90s.
Exactly. But the main thing that I learned was he used every square inch of the stage to the point where the entry doors to the stage were finished so that they looked like part of the SGC. That door that swings out at the end, that it says, emergency only or something, whatever it did, leads out to
the offices,
world of everything else.
Yeah. You go down. For people listening, the control room. You take you go down and then take a right. That corridor led to outdoors and to Atlantis. If you kept on going.
Yeah.
Man.
And the same thing with Destiny. So when I built it in the stage, obviously I couldn't use standard doors, but I went like wall to wall in there as much as I was able. And utilized every square inch. And like I say, by the time the actors would get into it, and then they'd finish blocking a scene or something, and they're going to go back to their trailers, and the number 2s get in and they set everything up. They'd be okay, now how do I get out of here again? And seriously, they would get lost in the set.
What a compliment.
I'm like, perfect. If I can get them lost and they're here, then the audience doesn't stand a chance.
The audience doesn't. No, yeah. It was. I was lucky to have seen all 3 shows sets, and it was absolutely marvelous. And when it got canceled, man, I mean, we don't have to get into that very much, but you guys were intending to amortize that over 5, seasons.
Yeah. We built with steel. We put in, the basic substrate for the set after the floor. The floor was all wood and little pony wall style builds, but everything else that went up and held up the second level was all structural steel.
Was it the same set from 1 to 2?
You don't do that for short term.
This is true.
Yes.
Okay, because Stargate Command got moved at one point.
Yeah, Stargate Command became the bridge. And we moved the shuttle out of stage 2 into stage 5. And what I did there is the shuttle door had that big working wheel and gears, and you'd push it in and it'd make this clanging noise and it'd rise up. So I put the bridge entry directly above the shuttle and used the same door, except now it's kind of cool. The door actually can drop into the floor. And that was when Rush first found the bridge. It's like, well, how do you do that for real? This is how, right?
Well, it's at the top of the ship, part of these thinking, where's the door going to go? It's going to go down.
Exactly. And because of the fact that we already had it built, I'm like, wow, this gives me the perfect opportunity. A little bit Get Smart, because there was like, this door drops down, those doors open. They're
ancients. They did everything wild.
Exactly.
They don't make any sense. But they do.
Yes, they do.
Raj had asked the question about, did you create any other designs for Destiny? So thank you, Raj, for submitting that. And last but certainly not least, James, anything that you're currently working on or that's going to come out soon that you can share with us?
Well, I did the last season of the 100, which is already aired.
Yep.
After six seasons, I guess I'm a show killer. I mean, they bring me in at the end, right?
You know,
Killed Universe, killed Atlantis, killed SG-1.
No, not true.
Killed
And
the one-
SG-1 got DVD movies, so.
There you go. Yeah. No, I mean, I did a Disney movie as well, which is a remake of a 1979 kids movie, which was it was more intensive than I certainly had anticipated at the beginning going into it. Disney has a very large level of oversight and approval.
Not surprising.
And to the degree that it was a little surprising to me. But
really, okay.
Yeah, they kept me pretty busy, but it was also very fun. And I'm not going to go and say too much about it because it's still in production.
Okay.
But there is an Egyptian element to this that when I was going in and getting the gig, I'm like, dude, Egyptian? Hello.
Here, let me show you
10 years
1,000 pieces.
Exactly.
Jeez.
Now, what do you want your mothership to look like? I'm sorry. Earth-based Egyptology. Got it.
Wow.
But we actually had an Egyptologist checking our homework on this. So
how cool.
We produced pieces. That's all I'm going to say is we produced pieces for this Egyptian exhibit, which are, in my opinion, reproduction quality. Like you could put these in a museum in place of the real thing, because that's the level of detail we went to in it.
Did you get to see the physical results?
Oh yeah.
How cool.
They look spectacular. And it's going to be a great, fun little movie. Our heroes and leads are in the 14-year-old age bracket, so it's very much a Disney kid movie. And it's called Under Wraps, and like I say, it's a remake of an existing 1979 one. And I will say that our mummy kicked the crap out of the mummy from the original. I think so did a lot of other things, but that in particular. When the mummy's one of the heroes, that you got to make sure that's a
absolutely
character.
That would be a key, I would think. Fun.
Yeah.
This has been a pleasure, sir. I had a long list of things that I would like to talk to you about. I would love to have you back later in the year to talk about a few more selections, if you wouldn't mind. It's been tremendous to be able to discuss some of these pieces with you.
Well, I'm very honored that you included me in your list of people to chat with, and this has been fun. It's always nice to ramble down memory lane, especially where it concerns Stargate. I don't know how many times I go, on Stargate, we used to do this, we used to do that.
It was a quality product. You guys created something that will withstand the test of time and be, re-examined generations to come.
I was just the lucky contestant, because I was the only one that was designer for all three.
Right. That's exactly right.
How good is that, right?
Yeah. So. And thank you for helping me to fill up my house with so many toys.
So. Yeah. If you like Egyptology, I might have some other stuff for you down the road.
All right. Thanks so much to James CD Robbins for making this episode possible. He is one of the original reasons why I wanted to do this show. Didn't really get a chance to interview him over at Gate World, and now he was mine, and it was fantastic. So well worth the wait. Thanks so much to James for that. If you really enjoyed this episode, I appreciate it if you'd click the like button. It really makes a difference with YouTube's algorithm and will definitely help the show grow its audience. Please also consider sharing this video with a Stargate friend, and if you want to get notified about future episodes, click the subscribe icon. If you plan to watch live, I recommend giving the bell icon a click so you'll be the first to know of any schedule changes, which will probably happen all the time. And that's what we have there. We still have a giveaway. You still have a few minutes left to submit, depending on your time zone. One of these communication stones is a screen use prop. The other is screen accurate. It's a replica. And for the month of January, Dial the Gate is giving away the replica. So to enter to win, you need to use a desktop or laptop computer and visit dialthegate.com. Scroll down to submit trivia questions. Your trivia may be used in a future episode of Dial the Gate. Please note the submission form does not currently work for mobile devices. Get this to me before February 1st Eastern time. So New York, East Coast, US, and we will make sure to add your name to the list of people that we're going to submit the drawing for this. I'll be notifying you in the next couple of days if you are the winner. We have fan art. Age Old Traveler by Jet Freak 7. This digital art was designed by Jet Freak. The model's Chili Truck, background by Sewer Pancake. There's probably a story there. And Atlas. So thank you for the submission. And Dial the Gate now offers merchandise. We're brought to you every week for free, and we do appreciate you watching. And if you want to support the show further, buy yourself some of our themed swag. We're now offering t-shirts, tank tops, sweatshirts, and hoodies of various sizes and colors for all ages at Redbubble. We currently offer 4 themed designs and hope to add more in the future. Please note that the word cloud designs, there's a version with a solid white background and another version that is transparent behind the letters. So just be selective of those when you're picking. The solid background is typically used for when you have darker colors, as with our Event Horizon background here, so that's why that's used on the right. But we wanted you to have options, so be on the lookout for that. Checkout is fast and easy. You can use your Amazon or PayPal account. Just visit dialthegate.redbubble.com, and thank you for your support. And thank you for tuning in for this episode. We really appreciate it. And this has just been terrific to have James on. Little snippet of the very beginning of our conversation before we started rolling, coming after the end credits. Up next, Gary Jones interviews Colleen, and she's going to tell you about her teddy bear story. I appreciate you tuning in. I'll see you live next weekend. Yes, before we do that, let me show you who's going to be coming along next weekend. Where are our guests? David DeLuise, Pete Shanahan, Sunday, February the 7th at 11 a.m. Pacific time, followed by Corin Nimick. We have rescheduled him for this Sunday, February the 7th at 1 p.m. Pacific time. That's what we've got heading your way. I'm David Reed for Dial the Gate. Thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll see you on the other side. Good day. How are we doing?
Not too badly. Yourself?
I am well, sir. This is so exciting.
Nice decorating you got going on there. I feel somewhat responsible.
Dude, it's so funny. It's like one of the reasons that I wanted to do this show was to sit down and have this conversation with you. And partly because so much of the stuff that is in my house came out of your head.
Apparently, yeah. I see a few things in the background there that I had a hand in, definitely.
Yeah, it's quite
GPM,
the menagerie.
Destiny.
Yes,
Yeah, it is. You got some nice toys. Is that a Telcheck device you've got? Oh my.
It is. That's the one from 200. Because that one actually lights. That one has the little selection of the little set of triple AAA batteries in the side of it and generate the little thing. I need to change the batteries in them though. But 2004, right? It still lights, James.
Oh my God.
Isn't that something?
That's very functional battery. What do you got, a ZPM in there?
I think so.